It's 6:43. If you just joined us, let's remind you of the top stories this morning.
Well, Hamas have released 2 American hostages in what they have described as a sign of goodwill. And the pair, mother and daughter, have been reunited with family members in Israel. That's as US President Joe Biden calls on the mother and daughter to say the White House will help them in their recovery.
Security is being ramped up in London as thousands of pro-Palestinian demonstrators set to take to the streets today amid fears that there could be potentially some violence.
And Storm Babette continues to batter Britain as it claims a 3rd life over the last 48 hours. That's as a 2nd red weather alert is issued in some parts of the UK.
Well, joining us to go through the headlines is GB senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and his long-suffering wife, the former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. Good to see you both this morning.
Morning.
You owe me a tenner for that, Claire. Yeah. Nigel, let's start with you. Should we be looking at the Telegraph?
Yeah, it's a really weird story, this. What it suggests is there has already been a terrorist attack in Britain and carried out in the name of Palestine. Now, there are no details for this. The Telegraph is saying the whole thing was hushed up because they feared there might be copycat attacks. That it involves a man who came to the UK in 2020, according to the Telegraph. Obviously, if there has been some kind of attack, incredibly serious, because at the moment MI5 and the Joint Terrorism Centre are trying to decide whether to up our security level to critical, which is the top level.
So this is an asylum seeker who's been here since 2020?
I don't know if it's an asylum seeker, but somebody who's been here since... Somebody who came here in 2020, according to the paper, yes. So
been here since 2020.
Yep.
And is this supposed terrorist attack linked to what's happened in the last 2 weeks?
Yes, because he's told police that he did it in the name of Palestine, so it is to do with what has happened. As I say, without the details, you can't really assess, A, how serious it is.
But if they hushed it up because they were worried about copycats, is it responsible to then report it?
Good question. I mean, the one thing it doesn't do is go into details of what kind of attack it might be. So I suppose if you're trying to copy it, you need the details to be able to do that. But yes, that is a very good point. I mean, if this has been kept under wraps for good reason, it would be irresponsible to then be reporting it. And obviously, you've got a big demo coming up today. And so there's all sorts of security concerns about that. So I was a bit uncomfortable about the fact they did that.
How have they explained that they've got the story in the first place?
They haven't.
They haven't. Because it's the front page lead.
It is the front page lead. I mean,
they obviously consider it very important.
They can, obviously, and also that they're pretty certain of their facts to be able to put it on the front page like that.
OK, let's move on to the Mail, Claire, which is bad news for the Tories because Reform UK are saying they're going to stand candidates everywhere at the general election.
Well, that's right. After the 2 by-elections that we have currently had in Tamworth and in mid-Bedfordshire, Reform have done quite well. When you start looking at the figures and you break down the voting, Reform did pick up a number of votes, especially from the Conservative side of life. So it's always interesting when smaller parties come into the mix, and I think that it's only a good thing for democracy to have choice. I don't have an issue with that. I think it's very difficult from a Conservative point of view because you're going to pick off of those supporters that are on the right-hand side of your party and you're going to split your vote that way. But I do think that it's interesting that Richard Tice, who is putting in this piece at the moment, is backing a referendum on proportional representation, which is an
as small parties always do.
Small, I was going to say.
Exactly, and it's going down the whole route of what the Liberal Democrats have done, and if the Liberal Democrats are going to prop up any kind of Labour government, as they hope, that is one of their demands on the table. So I think that in one respect you can look at it and you say this is a great idea for small parties to come through, but then they put things like that on the table and you think, OK, you're only going to appeal to a very small majority at this point.
And I hate to say it, because at one stage in my life I thought it was a very good idea, PR, but does it just create perpetual hung parliaments.
Yes.
It does. It doesn't give you... It very rarely gives you a majority government. You scrabble around for some kind of coalition, and as we've seen across Europe where proportional representation is used, those coalitions very rarely last and very rarely do anything good for the public that it represents. I'm not a great fan of it. I don't think it works. Every system has its faults.
And it also means that the third horse comes first.
Yeah.
Because once you get PR into place, so for instance, if in 2015 when UKIP were doing really well, they were about 15% in the polls. Had there been PR, they could be looking at sort of 80 odd MPs. So and they didn't get a single one. So it shows you what PR can do. I mean, it's certainly much more democratic. But the point of first past the post is that it should deliver you with a single strong government. Yeah.
And interestingly, with Reform in both by-elections, the number of votes they got was greater than the Labour majority.
That's right. Right.
So Labour's sort of swinging the flag saying, we won those seats. But actually, had Reform candidates not been there, it might have turned out differently.
Well, in Tamworth, it was particularly interesting because had all those Reform voters been Tory voters, which of course we don't know...
But it's suspected that a lot of them are.
Yes. But probably are, and certainly that the 5% they got in Tamworth is roughly where they are nationally. The Tories would have won the seat by 57 votes. So, I mean, it does show that when the general election comes, if Reform are fielding candidates, I think that Richard Tice is talking about 630 seats now. In those marginal ones, he could play a decisive role.
Yeah, he could. You mentioned Tamworth. Claire, let's have a look at Tamworth, because Andrew Cooper was the defeated Conservative candidate who... Now, I wasn't aware of this. Apparently, stormed off stage.
Well, he wasn't there for the actual... I mean, everybody was worried, because I actually watched it live.
Oh, did
and they were saying, where's the Tory candidate? Yeah, where's the... Actually, I was up early, I think. Where's the Tory candidate? Where's the Tory candidate? And they couldn't find him. And then, apparently, at the very last second, he did sort of scrumble in, or at least they pulled him in. But when he lost... He stormed off, apparently. Now, I don't know whether he's in that lineup.
Yes, there he is, just on the right.
Right at the end.
Yeah, so anyway, so what's gone on, Claire?
I mean, this just, I think, brings into the perspective of how you behave as a candidate in elections. Nobody wants to lose, and I speak as somebody who has lost an election this year, a local election, and you do have to stand there, and it's a painful, painful result if you lose. However, it is courteous to those who win to stand there, accept the result, congratulate them, and then you walk off. You can deal with your own emotions afterwards, but I think that this is just the right and proper way to actually deal with something which is a democratic process, which is legally binding, which you have to go through, and you have to stand there and you have to suck it up and you behave properly.
Well,
to turn up late, I also think, is extremely rude.
Because
to
they
all of
couldn't
those
do the declaration without him there, could they?
You cannot do the declaration without the candidate being present. And I think it's just extremely rude to all of the count staff who have worked throughout the evening to get this counted, but also all of the other candidates who had probably been there for some hours. Now, election nights are long, they are stressful, they are emotional, but you have to put that to one side and just behave like a grown-up.
Well, it's respect for democracy.
Yeah, I think so, yes. I mean, I picked up sort of Claire's emotions after she lost the election, but then I thought she was going to win it. I was actually astonished that what happened in our area. But yes, you're right. I mean, I think that it's really important that you just show good manners to everybody else. That it's the most great...
Do we know that he stormed off?
Yes, we have. There is video
of him storming.
Yes, he was only there for about 5 minutes. He arrived on stage, heard the result, off he went.
So he didn't even do a speech, because normally the sort of second candidate will do a speech.
That's right. He didn't even listen to the winner's speech.
Yeah, he didn't even listen to now the current MP's speech, which I just think is very, very rude. If somebody is doing the acceptance speech, you have to stand there, you smile, you shake hands, and then you leave. You don't always have to do a sort of little speech afterwards. But I think it's very, very important. This is a democratic process. People have gone out and voted. You have to abide by the kind of...
I mean, you should be
conditions that
thanking
we
the
had.
people who voted for you.
Absolutely.
As well.
And also to thank the count staff. That's always a really
Yes.
important
Yes.
part of it, that they are there and they have done their duty throughout the night. And you just say thank you to them. And thank you to the people that have helped you with the campaign as well and given up hours of their time. So I just think it's exceptionally rude and bad-mannered.
Yeah, well, look, I agree. It's not how it's done. Nigel, in the Express, Jonathan Gullis, a Tory MP, is amongst those who are calling on the Prime Minister to slash taxes, reduce illegal immigration, because they're common-sense policies. Well, how do you afford to do it, and how do you practically do it in terms of immigration?
It's the same old mantra they keep coming up with, that, especially from that wing of the Conservative Party, that the problem with the Conservative Party is it's not Conservative. Yeah. So, yes, let's slash taxes, let's stop the boats. They haven't come up with a way of stopping the boats, and if you start slashing taxes at the moment, we're not going to control inflation. So Jeremy Hunt is absolutely right that the inflation is the biggest target, and that's the one that they must deal with.
Yeah, it just seems you've got to have a solution. You can't just demand things. You've got to sort of have a plan of how you achieve it.
Well, exactly. I mean, and certainly with the Stop the Boats thing, that they haven't really... None of the plans at the moment, even were they to work, looked like they would stop the boats. So it was a bit of a rash promise from Rishi Sunak to say that's what he was going to do.
Mm-hmm. But this is just another sort of faction of the Conservative Party, which shows how fractured it is. This is the new Conservatives putting forward their agenda ideas, and apparently they do have a plan. They have a 12-point plan for immigration. They have one for tax cuts, especially for families. And when you sort of boil down the detail, especially if you're just going to look at the one around tax and families, I have a real issue when somebody is suggesting that a family is a mum, dad and children in this very traditional sort of 1940s setup, when families aren't like that. So I just think it's all very nice. It's a very lovely idea. If it was any good, I would suggest that the Prime Minister would have stolen those ideas already and put them forward, and he doesn't appear to have done so.
Right.
And meanwhile, we don't know how to eat baked beans properly, according to Heinz.
No, we don't, although I think we do, because the...
I can't see that it's that difficult, baked beans on toast.
Well, precisely. I had it last night. What Heinz have come up with is a 5-point guide about how you should actually do it.
Right. Well, how should you do it?
Well, and why are we doing it wrong?
We're not. I mean, the only thing... First of all, you toast 2 slices of bread. Right, yeah, OK, check. Warm the beans on the hob.
They say white bread as well, don't
White
they?
bread, yeah. Warm the beans on the hob, check. Butter the toast, check. Spoon the beans on top, check. Yeah. The only one which I don't do, or didn't do last night, is apparently you store the can upside down. That seems to be quite makes sense. So is that the beans will come out, you don't have to start scooping them out with your fingers.
But that's just wrong, isn't it? Because then you've got a can that's upside down and the label is the wrong way, and then your cupboard just looks really, really chaotic.
But also, I just the best way to heat the beans is in an aluminium pan.
Yeah.
If you're pouring it out of the can into the pan anyway, you're going to get all the beans out.
There's always a few stuck in the bottom.
Yeah, but not if you did it this way, apparently.
But this is what a spoon is for, seriously. Yeah, people not just spoon out
so
the
not my fingers, then. I'm doing it the wrong way.
I'm not even going to ask.
And unsalted butter as well. Please note. Claire's a salted butter person.
I'm a salted butter.
I'm unsalted.
Yeah. All right, so you are in the minority on this one. It's wrong.
I'll put extra salt on butter.
Yes.
Apparently they recommend that too. But
Heinz, you can't think of anything more simplistic to eat anyway.
Exactly.
Heinz think we need teaching how to do beans on toast.
Apparently Pippa Middleton once published advice on how to make ice cubes. And Nigella Lawson broadcast tips on how to butter toast.
And Delia Smith did a whole recipe on how to boil an egg.
She certainly
did.
She? Yeah, she did. Yeah, I mean, the basics are important. I'm not sure that we need to written down like that.
Lovely. Thank you both. We'll see you a little bit later on.
And coming up, more on the 2 hostages, of course, released by Hamas.